Good morning, Philip. Time for an oil change. Remember last time?
I'd rather not.
Took 3 hours. You forgot little Henry's video game. You're not as entertaining as a video game, Philip.
Silence your oil change anxiety at Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Get an expert oil change in about 15 minutes with no appointment needed.
Thanks for coming in.
Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Service you can see, experts you can trust.
All right, folks, after a week away from my side, we are back in the saddle here for Season 7 of the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR Series on the iRacing service. And as you can see, tonight is the Voodoo Throwback 300 live from the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway in Concord, North Carolina. And after the guys at Leadfoot TV took over again last week, I'm happy to be back with you here tonight. My name is Jordy Caraher, and as I say, I was out for last week. Once again, shout out to the boys at Leadfoot for stepping in for me. And, you know, it felt like a bit of an academic ending, actually, given we were at a road course. Specifically, we were on the NASCAR West configuration of the Circuit of the Americas last week for the Valvoline Coda 110. And as one might gather from road courses, our winner was, of course, Jordan Kalinian from Salisbury, North Carolina, in the Control-Alt-Defeat Motorsports Toyota. And for Jordan, as we'll take a look at our overall standings, the win wound up being by a little over 5 seconds by the end of it. Qualified on pole, won both stages, and was relatively, impenetrable in terms of actually being able to have an attack on him for the most part. And in the end, it was, as I mentioned, his 4th win of the season, 23rd of his career within the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR Series. And that just extends his overall lead, which definitely has seen some changes since the last time we were together here on the broadcast. So we'll take a look at our overall driver standings here. So with 2 races left until we get into the playoffs here in a few weeks' time, what I can tell you is that our top 6 drivers there in the standings, from Jordan Kalinian through Blake Thronberg, no matter what happens in these next 2 races, they cannot be knocked out of the playoffs, whether it's, just purely on track. I mean, penalties could, of course, play a role. We've seen them play a role recently. But if things were to hold as they are now in terms of purely on the track, purely competitive, top 6 are locked in solid here right now. And yeah, you can see the gap at the bubble, really not a whole lot to worry about there. As it stands right this second, it would probably take a race absence over tonight or next week to ultimately alter what our top 16 looks like. And you can see it's Lee Campbell and Kyle Knoll holding down the final spot in a joint tie for 15th. So lots of work to do for, your Ryan Gibson, Anthony Schauer, Tyler Fitzsimmons. They're realistically probably the only 3 who have a shot, a very outside shot at that, to claw back into the top 16. Of course, reminder that we are not operating on the previous chase format, which meant a win and you were automatically in. So obviously that plays a different role this year. And as I say, we're just 2 weeks away from finding out what our playoff picture is going to look like here. And we're going to do it in what's going to be unquestionably the most grueling race of the year here. Of course, it is the Voodoo 300. And 300, you absolutely get the picture of what to expect here, as it will be our one race of the season, this season, that does have 4 stages in it. So the way it breaks down, we'll get into that here in just a moment. But the other variable to all of this is it's also our throwback race, meaning even though we have 4 stages, we're not going to have stage cautions. So we're just flying straight through this here. And it looks like practice is just wrapping up from what I'm seeing. And we'll get into our standard 2-lap qualifying formats. And yeah, then we'll get a sense of where everybody is speed-wise. Looks like 1 minute remaining in our practice session to this point. And yeah, don't worry about the caution flag being on there at the moment. And yeah, as I say, we're just about ready to get into our actual qualifying configuration. And there you saw a good overhead of the infield of the Charlotte Roval, which we'll also be visiting later in the season. So a couple of trips around this particular circuit or facility, I guess. 2 different configurations, obviously. And yeah, that's what I was saying. Of course, the oval and the roval. Oh, I guess I may have missed that in the schedule. So that is a correction in the ear of race control, which I am happy to have back for the record. A couple of weeks ago, that was a little bit chaotic there at times, but happy to have you back in my ear here, Corbin. So thanks for the correction there. So we're looking at a 20 driver field here, it would appear, as things just get reset for qualifying. And let's do a little bit of an overhead here to see who we can spot on track potentially. Oh, here we go. We'll get our first look at our championship leader, the 00 of Jordan Kalini, and of course last week's winner at COTA on the NASCAR West configuration as well. And he was setting the pace in practice, so we'll see if he's able to lay down a marker here in his hot laps. And I would imagine, yeah, we just saw him exiting pit lane, so this will be his first of 2 attempts here. Around this fairly standard 1.5 mile configuration. Oh, maybe a little brush against the wall there. And meanwhile, Bryce Fontaine set the pace for the moment. And Mason Tomlinson just pips him, actually. So 2 hyperdrive guys at the very top as it stands. Tomlinson on pole with a time of 29.554. Let's see if he's able to better that here on his second attempt. Charging to the line. And right now, it looks like that time's going to hold. And no one's been able to challenge it just yet. As we'll head back to Jordan Kalinian. Just to see, we're seeing more times gradually coming onto the board. And our series leader is going to be heading into pit lane. So let's check in on a guy we've seen win recently, that being Scott Bailey. Little brush off the wall there himself. Currently running 4th. And okay, so that was a little bit of information that I was going to ask for, but that is all good just to give me the info I need for a little bit later as Bailey makes his way into pit lane. Now, 2 minutes remaining in the session here. Let's see if anyone else is going to go out. How about Blake Thronberg here? One of our drivers who, as mentioned earlier, is locked into the playoff picture. Currently running 14th in the qualifying order. But as you can see, 3/10 separating all 14 drivers who have put up a lap to this point. So, not a whole lot to read into that just yet. And as he crosses the line, we'll see if he improves the time. Does not appear so. So we'll skip over to, or I thought we were going to skip over to Jared Ireland, but it looks like he's just putting in the one lap. Let's see if CD Mangram's out here, and it doesn't appear as though he is. So we're looking at possibly 5 drivers who won't set a time here with 55 seconds left in our session. And right now, it's looking like Mason Tomlinson will be the one leading them to the line. As again, we're just getting some confirmation as the clock ticks down. $30 seconds. Yeah, not a whole lot happening there right now. And yeah, confirmation that what we're going to see here, like what you're seeing for an order, that is going to be where it is, because that's where the clock is and that's where she's going to end. And so we'll get into the full qualifying order here momentarily, but it looks like it'll be Mason Tomlinson in the number 4 Hyperdrive Esports Toyota out of Eudora, Kansas, who will be on pole for tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. And it looks like everybody's starting to grid up here. Pull that leaderboard away as they do. And there we're on board with Jose Mercado, who, as you can see, will be on the outside of the front row. But again, we'll get into the full qualifying order momentarily. And as we wait for the final few drivers to grid up here, again, we'll take a closer look at the overall standings picture really quickly. Again, 2 races remaining in the regular season before our playoff field of 16 gets sorted out. So it's just here, and then the series return to Chicagoland next week to wrap up the regular season, and then off we go to the playoffs a couple weeks later. But of course, there is an all-star race to contend at North Wilkesboro in between. So still a lot to happen here in August within the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR series. Of course, it is all presented by Valvoline Instant Oil Change. I should have mentioned that off the top. And it looks like we are good to go. So, as mentioned, we will head over to this side where, again, we find the number 4 Hyperdrive Esports Toyota of Mason Tomlinson out of Eudora, Kansas, occupying pole position. And as mentioned, on his outside is the number 41 GTR Motorsports Ford of Jose Mercado out of Kissimmee, Florida. On to row 2 now, where we find the second of the Hyperdrive entries here tonight, the number 17 Toyota of Bryce Fontaine out of Cape Coral, Florida. And on his outside, we have last year's Charlotte winner, that being the number 8 Chevy of Scott Bailey, driving for Blue Company. It looks all okay on my end. If there's something going on for other folks, please let me know. It's looking good on my side. Not 100% sure what's going on. We'll soldier on here for the meantime, though, and we'll go to row 6 where we have another previous Charlotte winner, as a matter of fact. His one win in the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR Series, the number 7519 E-Racing Ford of Andy Hurdle out of Dayton, Ohio. On his outside, we have the Season 3 Earl Ross Cup champ, the number 97 Tornado Alley E-Racing Toyota of Ty Higginbotham out of Kansas City, Missouri. We go back to North Carolina to begin row 7. Actually, it's an entire North Carolina row 7. Kyle Knoll in the number 15 Storm Surge Esports Toyota will start this one 13th. On his outside, the defending Earl Ross Cup champ Blake Thronberg in the number 3 Control Alt Defeat Motorsports Chevy out of Graham, North Carolina will start this one 14th. On to row 8, and the one-armed bandit here in the field, Jared Ireland. Hopefully the recovery's going well, sir, in the number 13 Blue Collar Racing Chevy out of Eudora, Kansas. Great to see you back on track. I know you were there last week, but I wasn't myself, so good to see you, sir. On his outside, we have the number 1 Tornado Alley Racing Toyota of CD Mangrum out of Atlanta, Georgia, as it looks like we're potentially starting to roll here soon. And, okay, so we'll rip through the remainder of the grid here real quick. We have the number 6 Ford of Lee Campbell out of Ballston Spa, New York, starting this one in 17th. Then we go to Moyock, North Carolina for... We have him as 5. This livery, I think, says 57. Anyway, it's John Williams driving his, again, Mid-Pack Motorsports Chevy. And rounding out the field, first time I've seen this driver here this year, it is Jeremy Crow in the number 64 Chevy. And rounding out the field, returning to the series for the first time in a little bit, it's the number 16 of Ryan O'Toole, who joins us from... It is Oregon, obviously, as evidenced by the livery there. Just want to make sure I have the city route. And sounds like we're getting a pit lane start for Blake Thronberg here. Possibly an issue there on the 3. As we'll bring it back up to the head of the field. There we go. That's a better look. And yeah, just to fill in a couple of the blanks there at the end. Owensboro, Kentucky, the hometown for Jeremy Crow in the 64. And confirmed it is Portland, Oregon for Ryan O'Toole, but all eyes are on Mason Tomlinson at the moment as we go green for tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. And again, it is Tomlinson leading. We'll have to see what's going on with Blake Thronberg there. Bit of a developing story, perhaps. Obviously, and it sounds like he's just going to be at the back of the field here. Sounds like it's all good from his side. And what I was about to get to is it is a long way to go here tonight. A lot of opportunity to be able to make up, time and space here. But if your name's Mason Tomlinson, you're just happy with clear track in front of you here as we're on lap 2 of 200. And as a reminder, we're looking at 4 stages of 50 laps apiece, as we will get into the race analysis here early on. Again, 4 times 50, looking at a fuel window of 29 to 33 laps, so you're looking at least 1 green flag pit stop per quote-unquote stage. And again, this is the reminder that because it is the throwback format, no stage cautions, as it were. And of course, as I mentioned off the top, Scott Bailey was last year's winner in this 300 event. So we'll see if he can pull off the back-to-back, which would certainly be a boost for him heading into the playoffs. But it's Tomlinson looking comfortable out front here in the beginning. Jose Mercado second, Bryce Fontaine third. Justin Belmonte up to 4th. He's flipped places with Bailey. And only a couple of smaller changes through the top 10. Jordan Kalinian's grabbed a couple of spots here. He's up to 7th after starting in 9th. Mario Ercolani remains 6th. Mike Marini down a spot. He finds himself in 8th. Tom Janikowski down a spot. in 9th. Andy Hurdle rounds out your top 10 at the moment. Ryan Gibson down a couple of places in the early going. He finds himself in 12th. And as mentioned, not really a whole lot separating the drivers who did set times within the qualifying session, so fair to expect some parity here throughout the evening, I would think. As we'll bring it back up to Mason Tomlinson at the head of the field. So give us a good look here, hugging that inside line. And yeah, everything relatively solid here in the early going. Of course, that's just a recipe for disaster to even suggest such a thing. Yeah, everything looking good so far. On to lap 7 now of 200 in tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. And let's check in now with third place Bryce Fountaine out of Cape Coral, Florida. Of course, Fontaine's been competitive throughout the season here. Winner, of course, earlier in the year. And should actually make sure I'm on the ball with this because, of course, we are on lap 8. You know what that means. We'll remember Kyle Busch. Yeah, kind of walked over all over the start of that intro there in the beginning, so apologies for that. But again, fair to always make that acknowledgement, as we've done ever since the tragic news came a couple months ago. And again, Tomlinson continues to lead. Jose Mercado second. Bryce Fountaine third, as we're on lap 10 now. Justin Belmonte fourth. Scott Bailey rounds out your top 5. Although there is a roughly 1 second gap between 4th place Belmonte and 5th place Bailey, you do see a bit of a breakaway emerging. And you also see Jose Mercado maybe shaping for a move on Tomlinson there, going through 3 and 4. Eventually just tucks back in behind, but may have a good run here. Tomlinson will go high, initially anyway, then dives down to the lower line. And Mercado may have to contend more with Bryce Fountaine here shortly. And that battle would be music to Mason Tomlinson's ears if they're able to, or if they're forced into continuing to battle, and that allows Tomlinson to get away a little bit. But for now, let's slip into we'll call it the chase pack here. We'll go on board with the number 12 Toyota of Mike Marini, currently running in 8th place. Marini looking like a solid bet to wind up in the playoffs once again. And not necessarily a surprise there. He's been a guy who's been in the picture. Meanwhile, we do have a battle for the lead here. Mercado on the inside of Tomlinson. And he's through. Jose Mercado takes the lead on lap 13 of tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. See what kind of answer Tomlinson gives, or whether he and Fountaine maybe formulate something within the hyperdrive house there, although Tomlinson smacking the wall won't help their cause. They even allow Justin Belmonte to get further into the picture. And indeed, Belmonte trying to get up to this lead trio. As again, Jose Mercado leads this one now. Took the lead a couple laps ago. And we'll see what he's able to do with it in the early going. And Tomlinson going high. I wonder if this is going to let Fontaine get through on the lower line through 2. Tomlinson holds the position for the time being. And it looks like a similar pattern developing here, although Belmonte may have some ideas. He's creeping up on the back of Fontaine here. And as mentioned, a little over a second separating this lead quartet from 5th place, who is now Jordan Kalinian, as he's gotten by Scott Bailey. So a little bit of clean air for the 00. I would imagine will eventually drag him into this lead conversation. And for now, we settle into a little bit of a pattern here, at least for the time being. Meanwhile, let's go a little bit further back to battle for 9th between Andy Hurdle and Mario Ercolani. At least it was Ercolani. He's dropped down to 13th, 14th now. I wonder if something's going on with the 29. And yeah, being told it was wall contact out of 4 right about here. And that's caused him to plummet down the board. Now finds himself in 15th. So let's go to the 97 of Ty Higginbotham here now in 8th. So we'll get roughly into the vicinity of that previous battle. As we'll see Mike Marini trying to make a move on Scott Bailey down low. Bailey holds the position for the time being. We'll see if Higginbotham's able to get some momentum up high. Higgy holding his nerve and his line here so far. And up into 7th he goes. And he's certainly had a consistent run of it for the most part since coming back. Obviously, a little bit too little too late in terms of him realistically getting back into the playoff picture now, given the later start to his season. But good to see the form has been there for the 97 as he goes down low here on Bailey. And he's going to grab 6th position. As we'll bring it back to our race leader, Jose Mercado. He's opened up a half-second gap on the 2 hyperdrive cars here. Tomlinson and Fontaine running 2nd and 3rd, respectively. And there you see Jordan Kalinian getting ever closer to this lead group. Again, still a long way to go here tonight. We've just hit the 10% point here, actually. But we're also roughly probably 10 laps away from the lion's share of the field coming into pit as well. So that'll be our first sort of sense of strategy here early on. And again, it's definitely a different thought to have here tonight. You're not just trying to get to the end of the stage. You're trying to figure out what'll maximize efficiency and what'll get you the most speed in terms of when to stop. But right now, as it stands, the 41's looking awfully comfortable out front. Took the lead on, I believe, lap 11 of 200, and he's held it ever since. As we're set to begin, I believe, lap 23. There it is. And yeah, let's get back down to that battle toward the back of the top 10 that I was alluding to earlier. Still looking feisty back there. We'll make sure we have the right camera. Scott Bailey right in the thick of it in 9th. Kyle Knoll trying to grab the position from him. Room left to race. Good job from both combatants there as Bailey drops to 10th. Ryan Gibson's going to fly by him here as well. CD Manger may even get a run here. But again, it's like I said a few weeks back whenever Bailey picked up his win. And that, of course, came at Martinsville. Doesn't necessarily matter where he is at the beginning. You almost always find him toward the head of the field at the finish as, Mangerman Bailey going a little door to door there. Maybe a little feisty in the early going. We still got a long way to go here. Lap 25 of 200 is where we are at the moment. As it looked like even Williams got by Bailey there. But again, back to the head of the field. Jose Mercado about 4/10 up on Bryce Fontaine. Justin Belmonte third. Pole sitter Mason Tomlinson's fallen down to fourth after initially leading this one. Lead for the first 10 laps. Yeah, looks like that gap's holding fairly steady here for now. But again, we're expecting pit stops. We were told 29 to 33 was likely our fuel window here, so we'll see if that plays out. It's also probably a good time to check in on our weather to see what our track conditions are like. And honestly, not too bad. 30 degrees track temperature, 24 Celsius in the air, 86 and 76 respectively in Fahrenheit. That 93% humidity might be something to keep an eye on, though. Could produce some slippery conditions here over the course of the evening, but looks like our drivers are handling things well here in the beginning. Very moist air, as pointed out by Race Control. And again, the lead holds steady up to about half a second now from 4/10 there a moment ago. As it looks like Jeremy Crow was our first pit stop there of the evening. It looks like he's rejoined 2 laps down. Again, the first-year driver out of Owensboro, Kentucky, joining us here this season. And it looks like Tom Janikowski is going to be among the first of our drivers to come in. There he goes from 16th. And we'll see if that triggers a bit of a chain reaction throughout the field. Lap 30 is when Janikowski comes in. Again, the calculus is a little bit different here tonight. You're not necessarily thinking about splitting the stage in half to try and maintain consistent conditions. Nope. Not quite sure what I heard. Oh, Kalinian coming in. That's what the leaderboard's telling me anyway. There he is. And yeah, so now we'll see if the field responds, because again, that's a driver who does draw attention whenever he's in, for sure. And it looks like we're going to get a pretty steady stream here shortly. Oh, man. Yeah, we've got a few drivers coming in. Bryce Fontaine, Ty Higginbotham among them. And Jose Mercado coming in this time. Half-second lead over second place Justin Belmonte. And yeah, she's looking a little hazy out there as Tomlinson joins Mercado and Belmonte in pit lane, handing the lead to Jared Ireland for the moment as we cycle. And while the focus is on Ireland, I will say straight away, I certainly apologize. I realize what I may have said at the beginning obviously could have been construed, not ideally there, so to speak. So apologies on that front. But again, very encouraged to see Ireland behind the wheel here tonight, and hopefully the recovery is continuing to go well. Good sir. As again, and we may have a Ryan O'Toole penalty for speeding on pit lane incoming here as the rest of the pit cycle continues. CD Mangrum in pit lane now. Kyle Knoll there with him. Ditto for John Williams. And yeah, Williams is going to peel out. Mangrum's going to get out ahead of Knoll here. As Ireland comes in. And it'll be the same with pretty much everyone behind him there as well, or the remainder of the guys who hadn't hit it yet. So you see Scott Bailey there. Mike Marini in as well. Lee Campbell in. Ryan Gibson. So that should complete, theoretically, the cycle through. And this could be where we find a bit of power in the undercut here, as it looks like, for now anyway, Jordan Kalinian showing up as our race leader. And he was the one, of course, that triggered the lion's share of the pit stops here. And he finds himself with a comfortable 2-second lead over Bryce Fontaine now. Now, I'd be... And, yeah, we'll see how this evens out over the course of the evening. Or the course of this stint, I should say. As, of course, the degradation will become an issue for Kalinian with the chase pack having slightly fresher rubber. Now, what I would be curious about is to see if there were different levels of service in play. I would imagine full service for the lion's share of the field, though. Yeah, no reason to chance it this early on. Because, yeah, nothing ventured, nothing gained only takes you so far. As Kalinian's going to go through and lap Jeremy Crow. Again, the gap about we'll call it 2.2 seconds with a bit of a roundup here. There it goes. From Kalinian to Fontaine. But we'll jump in with Jose Mercado here in the number 41 GTR Motorsports Ford. He was the leader prior to this round of pit stops. Led for about 20 laps. As we're coming up on lap 40 here, that'll be our next lap. So it'll be 11 to go in this opening stage. But as a reminder, no stage caution to go with it. So we just keep rolling on here as Kalinian completes lap 39. Looking for win number 5 on the season to extend his championship lead. But of course, again, we're now only 20% of the way through this race here. Or at least we will be once we get to the line. And things look to have spread out for the majority of the field. We'll go back to Scott Bailey battling John Williams. Trying to hold Williams off for 12th place right now. This would be one of the closer battles on track. Of course, well, matter of fact, if you look at the times, it is the closest. And yeah, the other component of having a dedicated race control here is you learn about different strategies that would be coming into play, and certainly lots of different shifting configurations being noted by race control. In the interest of the drivers wanting to stick to their formats or ways of doing things. Maybe we won't necessarily divulge right away, but could be relevant later on. We'll have to see. We'll back pocket that discussion for the time being. And kind of talked about it a little bit earlier here in the stints. Jordan Kalinian did get the undercut, but the gap is going down ever so slightly. It's down to, it was 1.7 seconds a moment ago. Bryce Fontaine taking little chunks out of it. Okay, so lots of discrepancy in the times there as well. We're understanding that Kalinian ran somewhere in the 35s, low 35s, I believe I was told. Mid 34s for Fontaine. Jose Mercado into the 33s. So 41 looking like it is quick here this evening. But he's still... So definitely some of the gap being made up here. You see the lead is down to 1.55 seconds on track, or at least it was a moment ago. As we're about to complete lap 45 of 200 here at tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. And it was funny looking at the fence art there coming through on iRacing, just the way the images kind of generated. For a second, I thought it was rain, but then I remembered this is NASCAR. At least in iRacing. And we have our race control also dabbling in meteorology on the side here as well, referencing a cell there off the corner. So maybe my eyes aren't playing tricks on me, or maybe it's just inherent exhaustion on my side too. Inherited exhaustion it is. As we see the gap being cut down again, it's now 1.2 seconds. Kalinian is out ahead of Fontaine on lap 47. So 3 laps remaining here in this opening stage. Again, as a reminder, we're not stopping for a stage caution. So these next 4.5 miles will determine our first batch of points being handed out tonight, as we'll temporarily go back to a battle for 6th place. Jared Ireland and Ty Higginbotham separated by just a couple tenths. Oh, both of them smashed the wall at a 4. Looked like Higginbotham got a little bit worse, as Ireland's all over the back of the 97 here now. Could be shaping up for a move. And coming through 1 and 2. Looks like Higginbotham will hold a position. Oh, no, he doesn't. Ireland briefly up. Higginbotham gets the drive out of 2. But Ireland may have the move through 3 and 4 this. Oh, maybe not. He's actually, sliding through the turn. May have slightly overcooked it through 3 and 4, and that's going to give Higginbotham some breathing room in 6th. As we'll go back to our race leader, Jordan Kalinian, as he's about to complete lap 50. So that is our first marker in terms of doling out some stage points here. So Jordan Kalinian will win the stage. Bryce Fontaine 2nd. Jose Mercado 3rd. Justin Belmonte 4th. Mason Tomlinson rounds out your top 5. Ty Higginbotham 6th. Jared Ireland 7th. CD Mangrum in 8th. Mike Marini 9th. And Ryan Gibson rounds out your top 10. So there's your first batch of points here. But as mentioned, we just keep rolling on here for the beginning of stage 2. And what that should mean is probably another round of pit stops in about 10 laps if the math serves. 10 to 15, we'll say. And as much as everyone wants to be in the lead, people are battling for positions all through the track. Let's go to CD Mangrum trying to hold off Mike Marini for 8th. Ryan Gibson lurking there in the background, about 3/4 of a second separating those three drivers. But everything looking relatively peaceful here in the early going, as we're now obviously a quarter of the way into this one. Let's go back a little bit closer to the front, where we'll find the number 60 of Justin Belmonte in third, being pursued heavily by Jose Mercado. Just 2/10 separating them on track. And we'll have to see if this develops into anything further. But again, no need to necessarily push it too hard in stage 2, especially when you've got 4 to deal with this evening. And let's just see if there's anything else happening on track here of note. This is certainly the closest battle we're seeing on track at the moment for third place. May have some intrigue up front, though, as Bryce Fontaine has closed the gap to Jordan Kalinian. There it is. About 1/10.5 separating them on track here now. And, of course, these will be two of our principal combatants for the Earl Ross Cup in Season 7 whenever the playoffs begin here in a few weeks. And this may well be where the degradation of the tires for Jordan Kalinian in the name of that undercut could be coming back to haunt him here, as looks like Fontaine will be able to continue closing that gap. Well, let's just see. Try to see what I can find here in terms of times. But again, it's still 1/10.5 separating these two. Kalinian comes down for the block. And nice run out of 2 there to keep Fontaine at bay for the time being. As we're now on lap 58 of tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. And the Voodoo, of course, is for Voodoo Burgers. Shout out to our man Jason Butler there. And as this battle continues, it looks like Belmonte's left Mercado behind here for the time being, trying to catch up to this lead pair. And Fontaine, I thought he might be shaping for something out of 4, but not quite close enough. As we begin lap 60, he may have something through 1 and 2 here, though. Fontaine down the inside, and there it is. There's the race lead for Bryce Fontaine. And he'll consolidate that through 2. See if Jordan Kalinian immediately makes a play to get it back. He goes low through 3 and 4, but that's because he's pitting. So he pitted first in stage 1 out of our principal contenders. And there you see he's in. That looks like Janikowski in ahead of him. And so again, Kalinian will benefit from the undercut and the fresh rubber for the time being. But we'll see how the field responds. As we're on lap 61 now, Bryce Fontaine, your race leader. And it looks like someone ahead of him may have ducked into pit lane. Apparently with a big puff of smoke there in the background too, as you saw as Kalinian left pit lane. So we'll jump to, well, he just went by us actually, the number 60 of Justin Belmonte running in second for the time being. 6/10 back of Bryce Fontaine. Not a whole lot of response from the rest of the field to Kalinian's pit stop just yet. As our leaders come up to the back of Andy Hurdle, who appears to be on the verge of going down a lap. And yeah, Hurdle kind of finds himself surrounded by the leaders there for the time being. It looks like Fontaine's through for sure. Belmonte up high. Oh, dear, Hurdle up high. Kind of threw maybe an inadvertent chop on Belmonte there. Maybe trying to be high out of the way, but Belmonte and Fontaine both in. Ditto for Jose Mercado. So that's your top three in. And it looks like, who's that joining them in the background? Higginbotham as well. And so that'll hand the lead back to Jared Ireland as we're in the middle of our second pit stop cycle on lap 65 of 200 here in tonight's Voodoo Burgers Throwback 300. Ireland side by side with Janikowski. Let's put him another lap down here potentially. As we got our first caution of the evening. Let's see who or what the culprit might be. And this is certainly interesting timing here. Just waiting for something from race control. And it's a spin for Jose Mercado out of pit lane. There you see him just emerging. Let's see if we can go back a little bit to see what actually happened here to the 41. All right, so to be clear, this is the replay. You see Fontaine and Belmonte coming through. Yeah, a little bit of a squeamish pit exit there for Mercado, and yeah, there it is. Not ideal to say the very least, but shouldn't be too damaging to his overall prospects here to get back into contention. The interesting note here is that, a number of drivers had yet to make their second pit stop. We were very much in the window for it, so bit of a different ball game here now. And there you see it. You're going to see about 7 or 8 cars in, led by Jared Ireland, who was the race leader at the time of the yellow coming out. Again, first caution of the evening. And let's see if we can get a good view on exit there. So being told Bryce Fontaine, lucky dog recipient, and we would imagine, as it looks like Ryan Gibson's going to get out of pit lane here first. So is that something extra in the background, perhaps? Is that Ireland maybe with an issue in pit lane? Yeah, he's still in his box. That's not ideal for the 13, to say the very least. Okay, so it looks like we could be dealing with some repairs there, as it looks like it'll be Jordan Kalinian back into the race lead here. I would imagine everyone ahead of him will be getting the wave around to be back on the lead lap. As we're on lap 68 of 200 here in tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. And you see a couple cars pitting there as well. I believe that's Ercolani and Janikowski in. And yeah, there's the cars getting the wave through. We'll be going green on lap 70. And again, it'll be Jordan Kalinian leading the way. Ryan Gibson there in second. CD Mangrum third. Kyle Knoll fourth. Mike Marini runs fifth. And being told by race control, one additional caution lap. Thought we were going to go green there, but we just needed time for the wave arounds to get back to the tail of the queue here. And as you saw, there were certainly a number of them. But again, the race certainly has a different outlook to it right now, or at least different feel in this middle part. Again, the order being jumbled up a little bit by the timing of the caution. And we're one lap away from 70 here. You know what that means, folks. And of course, as referenced earlier, that will in fact mean we go green next time by, not this time. As it looks like Ireland's rejoining here now. Again, took the time to repair some damage, so you'll see him emerge from pit lane now. Again, still a long way to go in this one, so nobody out of this one by any stretch of the imagination. And we'll see how this restart goes. Certainly a familiar place for Jordan Kalinian to be at the helm of these restarts. As we'll take a quick look at our race summary. As mentioned, that is our first caution of the evening. We've had 6 lead changes and 5 different leaders. And Mason Tomlinson got out to a blazing start there on pole. And you see that fastest lap in the 29s. Better than his qualifying lap, I believe, which I believe was a 29.5. So certainly some speed out of the 4 if he can get himself into a good position to use it there. Currently 11th, but all eyes are on the head of the field right now. Now that the camera is over as well. And Kalinian's got him bunched up and away he goes. Maybe a little bit of a jitter there, but it's not going to matter. The 00 gets away. CD Mangrum up to second. Ryan Gibson with maybe a little bit of a slow start on that outside line. And Knoll, I thought, may have had a little brush with the wall there out of 2, but it doesn't seem to affect him too much. And already Jordan Kalinian's built up a 0.6 of a second gap over CD Mangrum, who again has gotten by Ryan Gibson off the restart. So as you can see, your running order right now is Kalinian leading, Mangrum second, Ryan Gibson third, Mike Marini fourth, Scott Bailey rounds out your top 5, John Williams in 6th, Kyle Knoll 7th, Lee Campbell's 8th, Justin Belmonte 9th, Bryce Fontaine completes the top 10. 14 cars on the lead lap right now. Ty Higginbotham 11th, Jose Mercado in 12th. Of course, he was his spin out of pit lane or issue out of the pit exit is what triggered the caution. Mason Tomlinson down to 13th off the restart. Jared Ireland, the final car on the lead lap, in 14th. Then you've got few one lap down, Blake Thronberg, Andy Hurdle, Tom Janikowski. And then we have our first retirement of the evening there as well in the form of the 64 of Jeremy Crow. And Brian O'Toole and Mario Ercolani a few additional laps down apiece. Meanwhile, we may have something brewing at the back end of the top 5. Mike Marini and Scott Bailey side by side. But Kyle Knoll right behind them, keeping a close eye on things. As we're on lap 74 of 200 now. Marini potentially fancying a go there. Oh, no, that was a little adventurous there with Williams right behind. Noel just trying to find some clear track. And we'll see if Williams tries to get a little aggressive here now that everyone's settling back in. Looks like things are holding for now. But obviously, you know, these things can have a way of, you know, turning one way or the other. But right now, as I said, it seems like things are holding relatively steady, especially for the guy at the head of the field, Jordan Kalinian. 7/10 is the lead now over CD Mangrum. And yeah, very hazy conditions right now at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Matter of fact, trying to see if this might not be the best view for it. I'm currently looking for it. Yeah, lights are on up top. And yeah, hopefully visibility will improve over the course of the evening. And for those unaware, we would use realistic weather settings here within the iRacing software in relation to weather. So yeah, we just got her a little foggy here this evening. As again, Kalini continues to lead on lap 79 of 200. We'll head back to Bryce Fontaine down in 8th, trying to find his way past John Williams, while also potentially having to contend with Ty Higginbotham wanting his current 8th place position. And we'll look at it from Fontaine's perspective here. See if he's able to slip past Williams on the outside. Might run into the back of Belmonte, or Blake Thronberg, excuse me. Thronberg, of course, a lap down. And now he could use Thronberg as a bit of a pick. And that's going to get Fontaine the position. So Bryce Fontaine up into 7th place there. And we'll see if Mason Tomlinson tries to follow that. Ty Higginbotham would be looking to do that first, though, up on that high line. Meanwhile, we got a battle shaping up for 2nd place. Here now, we'll go to the 23 of Ryan Gibson. There he is. Season 1 Earl Ross Cup champ in the Blue Collar Racing Chevy out of Morgantown, West Virginia. Trying to get to the back of CD Mangrum. And you've got your 2 blue collar drivers there, Scott Bailey in 4th. The 3rd, of course, is Jared Ireland down in 14th. Right now, Gibson's focus is on the number 1 right ahead of him. And again, knock on wood, things seeming to be going relatively smoothly here through 83 laps. And so what we'll do is we'll go to our front row, who are back a little bit further down than they would have expected to this point. Currently following Jose Mercado. who looks like he's just gotten passed by Justin Belmonte for 11th. Mason Tomlinson, tonight's pole sitter, right ahead of him at 10th. And we could potentially be looking at our next pit window coming right around the halfway point of tonight's race, if not a couple laps sooner. Mercado all over the back of Belmonte here. Belmonte tries to go low on Tomlinson. See if there's a little bit of a push in play here if Mercado can get close enough to the back of the 60. Or if Belmonte can just make the move by himself coming through turns 1 and 2. And Belmonte's through. Looked like there was some wall contact there, but everyone's still pointing in the right direction. Meanwhile, the gap to Jordan Kalinian has closed considerably as well. CD Mangrum less than 3/10 back. There you see a visual representation. Ryan Gibson's going to be the challenger here, though, as he slips in underneath Mangrum to grab second. 23 is here on a mission tonight. He's on the outside of the playoff picture as it stands. And of course, we are in a different format where a win wouldn't automatically lock him in, but the 55 points combined with, a few fortuitous stage finishes here, that could significantly boost the 23's chances, as he is presently 33 points back of the final playoff spot. Or at least he was entering tonight. And so I wonder if Kalinian was a little slower. Gibson's going to just rip through here at turns 1 and 2, it would appear. And we'll see if he holds it through 2. And indeed he does. Ryan Gibson, your new leader on track. 23's looking racy here tonight. And his last win was all the way back in Season 2 in the NASCAR Heat era. That was the Daytona night race. Final race of the regular season then before getting into the playoffs. And so it's been a little while since we've seen Gibby at the head of the field. And yeah, just to reiterate, Ryan Gibson currently 17th in the playoff picture. Again, entering the evening 33 points back. And yeah, I wonder if the rubber issue's hitting Jordan Kalinian here now. Tire dag, as CD Mangrum's going to breeze by him with a little resistance here as well. At any rate, yeah, Jordan Kalinian's dropped down to third. Ryan Gibson's lead up to about a half a second now. But now that CD Mangrum's cleared him, we'll see if that gap drops. And notably, we'll have to see how long Jordan Kalinian hangs on here before triggering the third round of pit stops, because he's been doing roughly 30 lap stints here to this point. And he stays out for another one for now anyway. And so we'll hop back a couple of positions here. Bryce Fountaine and Scott Bailey battling for fifth. Both taking the high line through. And Bailey holding steady here at the moment. As mentioned earlier, he was last year's Charlotte 300 winner. And there's Jordan Kalinian coming in right on cue. So we kind of figured that might be the case within the next lap or two. But yeah, here's Jordan Kalinian at the end of lap 33, inevitably triggering the third round of pit stops. as Ryan Gibson continues to lead. Now we'll see what the undercut does for Kalinian in relation to the Stage 2 results. And also notably, we'll see if anyone's able to stick it out through to the end of lap 100 before coming into pit. But right now, again, it is Ryan Gibson leading. 4.5 tenths clear of CD Mangrum. Mike Marini there in third. About a similar gap back. Or rather, it's dropped to 8 tenths overall, as it looks like... Oh, no, we didn't have another pit stop there. They'll be coming soon, though. I swear it's not commentator crying wolf on that. And again, the timing will be interesting here as we're on lap 96. As Gibson crosses the line this time, or at least when he does. We'll have 4 laps remaining in this second of 4 stages tonight. And Gibby's all clear. CD Mangrum is closing the gap here, though. It's down to about 3.5 tenths. Should say 3 tenths here now, as it's coming down just that little bit more. And we may have a battle for third before we get a battle for the lead. Bryce Fontaine tracking down Mike Marini for third place. See if he's able to take him on the high side. There you see your top 4 all on screen. Marini holds steady for now on lap 98, but Fontaine just powers by out of 2. So Bryce Fontaine up into third. 8.5 tenths back of our race leader, Ryan Gibson. And you'd have to think he'd be trying to hold on for at least these last 3 miles of the stage, because every stage point would be important to him, certainly. As we're on to lap 99 of 100. And that gap, pretty steady. It's roughly 3 tenths of a second between him and CD Mangrum at the top of the board. Meanwhile, we got a battle between blue-collar teammates a little bit further back. Jared Ireland and Scott Bailey duking it out for 6th. They were closer before, certainly. A little bit more of a gap now. And let's see, that's Kalinian trying to unlap himself, trying to use that advantage of the fresh rubber here at this point. It looks like we have a pit stop coming in the form of Ty Higginbotham, as we're on to lap 100 now. 101. So that is Ryan Gibson taking stage 2. That's a huge 10 points for the 23. And yeah, we'll get a closer sense of the stage points here momentarily. We do know Ryan Gibson's won the stage, which again, those 10 points could be massive for his playoff aspirations. And again, with the chase format being a thing of the past here now, all you got to do is just get in and perform once you're into the playoffs. And again, we'll see how long Ryan Gibson stays out. He would have, of course, been one of the beneficiaries of the pit stop under the 1 caution that we've had so far. So maybe a little more mileage for him in this particular stint. Would not be a surprise, though, if he comes in relatively soon. Although, he's running awfully well in the lead, up to 9 tenths now. Or make that a full second. As Jared Ireland's made his way into pit lane. And on cue, there is Ryan Gibson diving into pit lane from the lead. CD Mangrum doing the same right behind him. Ditto for Mike Marini in third. And we'll see the same with John Williams and Lee Campbell as well. As there's Janikowski making his way out. And so this is where we should inevitably see the field cycle back into some kind of order. And let's see where Gibson comes out. It looks like it'll be Jordan Kalinian back in the race lead. Again, he was the earliest to pit stops, but we do have a caution. And I bet Ryan Gibson was hoping this would be like one lap earlier to benefit from a shorter pit stop again, but what's our issue this time? It's what we're trying to figure out at the moment, as again, we are under yellow. And just trying to see here. Looking a little further down the field. I know Mike Marini was running high, but now I see him in 13th. I wonder, something going on there. So same kind of thing that we saw from Jose Mercado before. That same spin on pit exit, only this time it's befallen Mike Marini. So let's see if we can go back and get a better look at that from him. From the 12. Oh, we just missed it, I think. So we'll dive back another 30 seconds. We'll get a good look at it here. As you see, he pitted at the same time as Gibson and Mangrum. Looked like clean out of his box, but you'll see right about here, maybe a little too trigger happy on the cold tires. And that's triggered our second caution of the evening. As Jordan Kalinian's come in for a pit stop, which is definitely an interesting strategic choice. He'd only been out for 15 laps there. I wonder if he's trying to get more on terms with everybody else, although you see Justin Belmonte in as well. Tom Janikowski back in. And yeah, just getting word of, stage 2 results. I may just need something to actually take it down, which I now have. Okay, so just getting the confirmation from race control on the stage 2 results as we're going to bring it back to leader Ryan Gibson, who was in fact the winner of stage 2, as we mentioned before. Huge 10 points for him in his run to try and get back into the playoffs. CD Mangrum finished the stage in second, Mike Marini third, Jared Ireland fourth, Scott Bailey rounding out the top 5. So all 3 blue-collar guys in the top 5. Great run for them. 6th place is John Williams out of Moyock, North Carolina, driving for Mid-Pack Motorsports. Another North Carolinian, Kyle Knoll, finished 7th. Lee Campbell up into 8th. And he's one of the guys that's on that playoff bubble right now, along with Knoll. So good to kind of cut a few points out of Gibson's stage win for both of them. Bryce Fontaine finished the stage 9th. Ty Higginbotham rounded out your top 10, so grabbed another point for himself, did the 97. And of course, in the case of Fontaine and Higginbotham, they grabbed their respective stage points while pitting. So ultimately they were able to grab those points while getting their ducks in a row here for this stint. And clearly it's played to their benefit, given that they'll be starting the stage 2nd and 4th, respectively. But again, all eyes will be on Ryan Gibson as he'll have control of the field as the pace car dips down right about meow. And so again, the 23 will lead him off the line. And there he goes, but Fontaine's going with him. And it's pretty much a drag race down into turn one. We'll see what Fontaine's got on that outside line. It seems like it's got some power coming through. But it looks like for now, at least, Fontaine does skip ahead, but Gibson will have the inside line through 3 and 4. As we're now into stage 3 of tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300, presented by, again, Voodoo Burgers as part of the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR Series, presented by Valvoline Instant Oil Changes. Bryce Fontaine is your new leader. CD Mangrum up into second. Ryan Gibson dropping down to third. Higginbotham into the wall. A couple guys into the wall there. But again, we continue moving forward. And it looks like Scott Bailey may have picked up some damage on the right front there, and looks like he and Mercado may have come together there a little bit again, coming through 4 onto the start-finish straight. But again, it's Bryce Fontaine who's the biggest beneficiary of all out of the restart, as he's got clear track in front of him and about a 3.5 tenths lead over CD Mangrum in second. And Tomlinson's moved back up into third. And Thronberg's in the infield here. Yay. We'll have to go back and see what's happened there. What we do know is it's very much not triggered a caution. Trying to get back to the 3. Should get a good look at it. As a note, this is a replay. And so coming through 3 and 4, let's see what happens. Oh, yeah, contact. That certainly doesn't help. Yeah, just a straight old shunt. And just another look at that, trying to get a look of who that came from. Lee Campbell, perhaps? Certainly who it looked like. And yeah, being told Kyle Knoll kind of wrapped up in this here as well. And yeah, it was Campbell who got sideways into Thronberg there, as we'll bring it back to live coverage now. Yeah, you see Knoll in pit lane there, and as mentioned, he's the other guy on the bubble right now. Again, it was a 33-point gap coming into tonight between Knoll/Campbell and Ryan Gibson, but any kind of damage here for the 15 that's going to require some extended repairs, some laps down. Everything matters here, especially with the additional stage at Charlotte tonight. And of course, with Gibson already having a stage win in his back pocket as the primary chaser. But again, it's Bryce Fontaine leading this one. Hyperdrive teammate Mason Tomlinson, tonight's pole sitter, is second. Just 2 tenths back. CD Mangrum runs third. Ryan Gibson fourth. Ty Higginbotham rounds out your top 5. Less than a second separating the top 5 as it stands. Or at least that was the case. It's now gone up a little bit, but you get the general picture. There's a group of about, 6 or 7 within a second and a half. And no, we're not doing the meme because I said that. And again, Fontaine continues to lead this one. We got a good little battle in the back of this lead group, though. Mercado and Kalinian. This would be for 6th place. As you see, a few different groups forming within this top 7. Kalinian trying to get to the back of that secondary chase group. And Justin Belmonte trying to tag along here as well in 8th. And in terms of damage, Kyle Knoll still in pit lane after the implications of that last incident we saw. And notably, all the cars running on the lead lap are within 4 seconds of each other. There's 12 of them remaining now, with Jeremy Crow still as our only retirement of the evening. Kyle Knoll and Blake Thronberg still in pit lane after the damage sustained in that incident. Higginbotham a little brush off the wall again. And speaking of Higginbotham, he is trying to track down Ryan Gibson here for 4th place. Battle of 2 former Earl Ross Cup champs. Although he's very much got the series leader all up in his mirrors right now. Jordan Kalinian trying to get through for 5th. But Jose Mercado may have something to say about that as well. Kalinian holds the position here for the time being, as we're now on to lap 120 of 200 in tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. And looked like maybe a little bit dodgy off the wall out of 2 there, but again, no harm, no foul. Everybody going in the same direction. Although Belmonte looks like he's trying to go in a different direction, that being up the leaderboard here, but Mercado will hold on to 7th place. As we'll bring it back to our race leader, Bryce Fontaine. Gap steady. It's not quite 0.3 of a second over Mason Tomlinson there in 2nd. And overall, in my view, still too early to try and do anything race defining, obviously. If you're the driver of the number 4, especially Mason Tomlinson. He's spoken a couple of times about how badly he's wanted to finally break through and grab that first win. But this race may well be the ultimate test of patience here, given its length and distance. Length in terms of like time, just making sure you stay focused. And again, things relatively single file-ish for the lion's share of the field. We'll go back to battle between a couple of banged up cars here potentially. Lee Campbell and John Williams battling for 11. Again, they're the last 2 cars that are on the lead lap right now. But even they look like they've got a little bit of separation happening. So everybody more or less just kind of getting comfortable into some grooves here right now in this kind of lonely middle part of this race. Everybody more or less just kind of waiting for the action to come here shortly. As we're now at the halfway point of stage number 3. Lap 125 of 200. As Kalinian maybe trying to make a move there on Higginbotham. And Kalinian with the dive down low. That would be for 5th. And it looks like the series leader has it locked down. Belmonte trying to make a run here on Higginbotham as well. And it looks like he's going to grab the position too. And just based on that run there, I know we've said it a couple of times over the years, but if Justin Belmonte winds up with a car that he likes, there are very few drivers that, I would trust more than the 60 in terms of keeping things consistently on rails for an extended period of time. As we're now on lap 127 of 200 here tonight. And Belmonte shaping up for something on Kalinian here, perhaps. And it looks like the 60's gonna push through. And notably, Belmonte and Kalinian both pitted under that most recent caution, so it's not a matter of tire difference between the two. That's just pure pace from the 60, who will now set off after Ryan Gibson for fourth. But again, everybody's chasing the number 17 belonging to Bryce Fontaine out of Cape Coral, Florida. And he's extending his gap over teammate Mason Tomlinson to about 0.6 of a second now. CD Mangrum a similar distance back in third. And again, I would have to think probably the next 5 to 10 laps you'll see some pit stops, I would think. And yeah, now that Kalinian's more or less on schedule after having pitted on the last caution, I think we'll see the lion's share of the fields coming in at relatively same window within, maybe 2 to 3 laps of each other. As again, Fontaine continues to extend his gap at the head of the field. We're going to dip back to the 97 of Ty Higginbotham, trying to get by Ryan Gibson here. Looks like Gibby's dropped a couple of places, finding himself down in 6th now. As Belmonte has gotten up into 4th. So I wonder if something did befall the 23 a little bit earlier. But again, it looks like everything's relatively stabilized here at the moment. And just a little bit of a waiting game in this particular part of the race. Although we are at the end of this coming lap here anyway. Oh, do we have someone coming into pit lane? Was that Tomlinson, perhaps? It is Mason Tomlinson making his way into pit lane on lap 130. Well, end of 32, beginning of lap 133. And so he's the first one who could potentially trigger something here. And we'll see where he cycles out. We've seen the power of the undercut at one point earlier in the evening, at least, with Kalinian emerging in the lead after that first round of pit stops. Of course, the caution coming during the second window altered the calculus significantly in terms of the whole cycle. That's ultimately what allowed Ryan Gibson to grab the stage win. And now, let's see, there's race leader Bryce Fontaine in. CD Mangrum inherits the lead now, with Justin Belmonte hot on his heels here. We'll see how long these two stay out. And of course, the longer you can stay out now, it means you get a potentially longer or shorter final stint whenever those pit stops come around, and potentially fresher rubber at the end. So making these laps count will be important here, and that importance just continues to grow with each passing lap that they can stay out. Or that little cushion, I should say. And getting word of Jose Mercado, Ty Higginbotham, Jordan Kalinian set to come in this lap is what I'm being told. And Kalinian might have sold a dummy there, perhaps, as Mercado and Higginbotham both come in. And for sure this time we're being told Jordan Kalinian in, and that does track. He was last in on lap 105. Justin Belmonte's going to peel in right ahead. Jared Ireland in at the same time. Doesn't look like anyone kicked up any unnecessary smoke there on the old brakes going into pit lane, so I think all three are in clearly. And now we bring it back to the track where CD Mangram's inherited the race lead, but still very much falls into the yet to pit category. So again, it's CD Mangrum leading, Ryan Gibson second, Mike Marini third, John Williams fourth, Lee Campbell's fifth, or was fifth, but now is headed to pit lane. Along with Andy Hurdle, CD Mangrum coming in this time around as well. And yeah, it looks like he's slowing down to take the turn, and indeed he does. Ryan Gibson doing the same behind him. And I think that's Marini in back as well. So your race leader for the time being is the number 5 Midpack Motorsports Chevy of John Williams out of Moyock, North Carolina. And Williams is a guy in the playoff picture right now. Williams coming in this lap, we're being informed. And there's the dive into pit lane. So that should theoretically complete our pit cycle as CD Mangrum exits pit lane. And you see Belmonte and Kalinian just flying by him. But again, they're all trying to catch Bryce Fontaine, it would appear. As he was almost immediate to respond to his teammate Mason Tomlinson's early pit stop. He was the one who triggered this round, was the 4. And now the gap is up around 2.4 seconds here for the 17. Although we'll go back to our battle for third right now, Kalinian and Belmonte. Looks like among our closest battle. Well, no, I should take that back. Marini and Campbell battling for 11th. And so at this point, based on the distance we've run to this point, I would suggest we're looking at probably one more green flag pit stop that'll get everybody to the end. And Marini's going to dip past Mario Ercolani, who's running 5 laps down in this one. Kyle Knoll and Blake Thronberg, meanwhile, both continuing to get damage fixed up in pit lane. There's the 15. And the 3... I don't even know if the 3's on screen. Is there a disconnection there, perhaps? Okay, so confirmation of Blake Thronberg being the second retirement of the evening as I try to bring it back to... As I try to bring it back to our race leader, Bryce Fontaine, but the cameras aren't playing nice. There we go. Okay, so lap 110, we're being told Blake Thronberg officially retired from tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300, so not an ideal result here for the defending Earl Ross Cup champ. But we soldier on with 18 still on track. And we're about five and a half laps away, from finding our third stage point scorers. Again, it's looking awfully good for Bryce Fontaine here right now for this third stage, as we're going to hit 5 laps to go now. And again, you see that gap hovering right around that 2.5 second mark. But there is some intrigue back there, as well as Mason Tomlinson and Jordan Kalinian battle for the runner-up spot for the time being. And Knowles now disconnected, which would suggest our third retirement of the evening, as Jordan Kalinian makes the move on Tomlinson for second. And so, again, that is potentially a blow to Kyle Knoll here, depending on how Ryan Gibson fares the rest of the way. Of course, he already has the stage win tonight, is on for another 5 stage points here in stage 3. And Fontaine may be deploying a fuel-saving strategy, I'm being told. But we'll have to monitor that situation. Certainly it's looking good for him right now. And yeah, let's go on board with him and let's hear a little bit of... Yeah, that power just dies through the turns. Yeah, interesting development here for the 17 as we begin lap 149 of 200. 2 laps to the end of the stage here, and of course there are no stage cautions as a reminder. So yeah, definitely an interesting situation developing here, especially given it wasn't all that long ago that Fontaine stopped, it feels like. Just maybe trying to extend to make sure he only needs to do the one stop to get him to the end. As we're now on lap 150, so this is the final lap of the third stage. And that gap is coming down fairly considerably. It's down to about 1.5 seconds now. But not come down fast enough as Bryce Fontaine will take stage 3. But again, we soldier on to lap 151 of 200. Into the final quarter now of tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300 in the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR Series presented by Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Bryce Fontaine wins the stage, Jordan Kalinian second, Justin Belmonte third, Mason Tomlinson fourth, C.D. Mangrum rounds out your top 5. We were just talking about it before the end of the stage. Ryan Gibson grabs another 5 points for finishing 6th in the stage, so that'll help his playoff chase over the next week and a half. Jose Mercado 7th, excuse me, a little bit of a stutter there. Ty Higginbotham 8th. John Williams 9th, and Scott Bailey, as it stands right now, runs out the top 10 on track. And again, we still have 12 cars on the lead lap, 3 retirements now, with Kyle Knoll and Blake Thronberg joining Jeremy Crow in the outlisting recently. And so now that we've hit this particular point of the evening, I'm going to go ahead and give my voice rest here for a few minutes, and we're going to go ahead and crank it up and then hopefully bring an exciting finish on the other side of that. So I'm going to go ahead and go quiet for a little bit, so let's let the engines do the talking. right, folks, it looks like we might be coming back just in time from our Crank It Up. Obviously, you saw a lot of activity happen during our Crank It Up phase, and you see Mason Tomlinson on pit road here. This may well trigger our final window. Bryce Fontaine coming into pit lane now as well. Yeah, this is where the dominoes start to fall. And we saw Fontaine doing some short shifting and lifting coast through the corners earlier. Perhaps trying to get to this particular point where he's able to pit and realistically get to the end without issue. Right now, this is your lead battle. Jordan Kalinian battling Justin Belmonte. We're trying to hold off Justin Belmonte. Kalinian made the pass on track on Bryce Fontaine earlier, as he was able to erase what had been at one point a 2.5 second gap. But now it's Kalinian and Belmonte going mano a mano here. As well, that's short-lived, as you see on screen. Kalinian dips into pit lane now. And now we still have a lot to play out here, folks. Justin Belmonte, of course, inherits the race lead. 3.8 seconds, the gap between himself and Ryan Gibson in second. And this may be the lap where a lot of things happen. As did Belmonte get down to speed? That's what the question is inevitably going to be from race control, as we see Mercado and Higginbotham entering in the background. And I think Belmonte may have just gotten in. That's the unofficial verdict now from race control. We're not seeing black flags. You see Lee Campbell making his way out of pit lane. And let's see where Kalinian cycled out. It looks like he's gotten out ahead of Bryce Fontaine here, which would run counter to what we were seeing earlier with the power of the undercut, because Fontaine was in a couple laps earlier. And Justin Belmonte good to go is what we're being told. And there he goes. He's rejoined and he's out ahead of Kalinian. So the strategy of staying out longer as the race is played out. Seems like there's been a little bit of a shift there, as we see, look like C.D. Mangrum coming in behind Janikowski there. And right now, Ryan Gibson is your race leader, but of course he does still have to pit. And yeah, could be a little bit of a dicey situation here. Sounds like we're getting more lifting and coasting by the sounds of it. There's Ryan Gibson making his way in from the race lead. And so John Williams is going to do the same thing. Mike Marini, over to you. Doing the same thing. I swear this isn't on a loop. Scott Bailey, your turn. He's coming in. So that'll complete the cycle, and that's going to give Justin Belmonte the race lead here. And he's got about a half-second gap over Jordan Kalinian. And again, Belmonte was the last of our leaders to pit, so you would have to think that he'll have the tire advantage here as well, even if it's only a lap or two. As well as fuel, absolutely. So timing's everything here. And if you're Justin Belmonte, you're looking at, if you can hold, certainly, you'd be looking at potentially a third race win of the year. Of course, he went back-to-back at Atlanta and Kentucky earlier this year. And if he was to hold on, obviously still, 26 laps to go in tonight's race. If he was to hold on, he'd be looking at 7 or 8. I'd have to do some updating on my numbers. another interesting development here. We were talking a little bit about shifting strategies earlier here, varying from driver to driver. Getting a little bit of intel here that suggests that the current strategies as they're playing out may favor the immediate chase driver here being Jordan Kalanian. But we'll see how it plays out over the course of the next 24 laps and change. And the gap 4.5 tenths now. And they're 5 seconds clear of anybody else on track. Mason Thomas third. Bryce Fountaine fourth. And Fountaine continuing to lift and coast from what I'm being told. Which again, given that he pitted on lap 167, that would put him at the top end of the fuel window for ensure that he gets to the end. And yeah, ditto for the other hyperdrive entry here right ahead, Mason Tomlinson. Again, you'd have to wonder out front. All indications would be that there would be no such worries for Justin Belmonte or Jordan Kalanian. So this could well be, barring any late shenanigans, potentially a two-horse race for the checkered flag here tonight. Which, of course, works out rather nicely that it's a bit of a showdown between these two because, of course, Kalanian and Belmonte are 1-2 in the driver's standings, with Kalanian holding a 119-point gap coming into tonight's action. But again, right now, Belmonte's the one setting the pace as we're on to lap 180 of 200 tonight. Moving the Throwback 300 as part of the E-Motorsports NASCAR series presented by our friends at Valvoline's Oil Change. While we may have a battle shaping up shortly here for 7th between Jose Mercado and Ty Higginbotham. Mercado currently holding the position. There's Higginbotham with Jared Ireland in between. Of course, another variable here with a race like this one that's longer, you have to consider tire allocations here as well. By the sounds of it, Justin Belmonte and Jordan taken one extra set over the course of the evening compared to those that would theoretically be chasing. So sounds. So again, we'll see if that comes into play as we're down to should be 2 laps to go. There it is. Again, Justin Belmonte holding the lead right now, steady about half a second over Jordan Kalanian. And again, they're collectively putting the field down. And speaking of down, Bryce Fontaine's dropped a couple of positions as he continues to conserve Jose Mercado by him now for 6th. So, interesting dynamics here for the 17. We'll see if when he gets in the position to be able to let loose here, and whether he'll have enough time to actually do anything about it. Higginbotham's going to go up to the top and vie for 7th. Of course, the other consideration with this, yeah, you're saving, but eventually you have to clear all these cars again, which is no easy feat. Especially in this series where the skill level is pretty solid across the board. Meanwhile, we could have a battle for third here between Ryan Gibson and Mason Tomlinson. We noted earlier that Tomlinson was sort of deploying the same thing as Bryce Fontaine, so this may be rather academic here for Gibson. And he's through into third. But again, almost 7 seconds separating these two from our lead duo, Justin Belmonte and Jordan Clean. And with 15 laps to go, again, you wonder when time starts to become a bit of a factor, or whether you try to account for some kind of late shenanigans here. As Ryan Gibson goes by Andy Hurdle, who, again, is a guy who knows a thing or two about conserving and playing the long game here at Charlotte. Of course, that's how he wound up with his lone win in the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR Series. Meanwhile, CD Mangrum trying to shake for a move on Tomlinson behind. Turn 3 and 4. Tomlinson holds firm for the time being. But again, we'll see if Mangrum goes for something here. Maybe in 3 and 4 if he gets a decent enough run. Otherwise, things are relatively, again, separated for the most part here, so we'll bring it back to race leader Justin Belmonte. 12 laps to go. As both Belmonte and Kalinian have put Scott Bailey a lap down in 12th. Through to complete another one is the 60, who's opened up his gap to about 3/4 of a second. And yeah, Tomlinson and Mangrum getting into tight quarters, more contact as they come through 1 and 2. There was contact out of 4. Looks like CD Mangrum's going to push his way through, and that's for 4th place. But Tomlinson's not going to want to give that up easily. Perhaps a little bit of damage to that front right of the 4. Am I looking at that correctly? Or, no, okay, damage on the right front of the 1 as well, it would appear. Definitely some battle scars from an evening like this, as we're down to 10 laps remaining. Scratch that. 9 laps to go as the leaderboard should update. There it goes. And Justin Belmonte holds the lead of about a second over Jordan Clean. And again, as mentioned before, really, I think we're looking at a situation where both these two drivers, fuel-wise, they should be fine to go to the end, it would appear. As we're down to 8 laps to go now. And again, Justin Belmonte looking for his 3rd win of the season if he's able to hold on for these last 12 miles. And we're down to just 11 cars on the lead lap here now. Meanwhile, Tomlinson and Mangrum continue to battle for more. Looks like CD Mangrum has the upper hand in that battle here now. A little bit of separation from Tomlinson. I wouldn't be surprised if Mangrum and Tomlinson have Higginbotham to worry about. could be a three-car battle for fourth. Meanwhile, Justin Belmonte just continues to tear up Charlotte here. 2/10 faster at least than anyone else on track. And like I said earlier, if there's a guy that you're worried about when he's on rails, I think he's got the number 60 on the side. In terms of pure pace, there wouldn't be many I'd put above Justin Belmonte right now, as we're down to 5 to go. Once the leaderboard doesn't make a liar out of me. There we go. 1.6 seconds now for Belmonte. Meanwhile, we could have some teammate action here potentially, as Higginbotham maybe shaking out something on Mangrum, but still has to worry about Tomlinson there too. And again, for Higginbotham, given his late start to the year, not necessarily in the playoff picture right now, but obviously a top 5 would be another fantastic showing for him. But the other variable is that Mangrum and Tomlinson very much are in that playoff discussion, so maybe just want to keep moving over the final few laps here tonight. And if anything were to happen from this point forward, we would be very much into green-white checkered territory with 4 laps to go. And yeah, just as I made the cut, of course, Higginbotham did get past Mangrum for 4th. But again, everybody's chasing the number 60 of Justin Belmonte, who again is looking for his 3rd win of the season. And looking awfully good for it right now. The lead up to 2 seconds now as the popsicle sticks are up. 2 laps to go. And that gap is continuing to grow. It's up to 2.3 now. I wonder if Kalinian might have a fuel issue here at the end. Wouldn't be surprised if he has enough to get to the end regardless, but again, everyone's chasing this guy. Justin Belmonte has seen the white flag for tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300. Final lap now here at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Just a matter of keeping it clean here for the 60 as he approaches lap traffic. And no issues as he comes down the back straight. And as he makes his way through 3 and 4, we're through the grind, folks. Justin Belmonte takes it. He wins the Voodoo Throwback 300 at Charlotte Motor Speedway. And Jordan Kalinian hangs on for 2nd. And it looks like Ryan Gibson will come through to complete the podium. And indeed he is, so this should be fairly informative chat here this evening, and it's a huge night for at least 2 of the 3 drivers on the podium. For one, obviously Justin Belmonte back into victory lane. Just as big a story, though, is Ryan Gibson clawing back some points to get into the playoff picture. And again, here's the guy who was able to survive at the very end. Out of East Patchogue, New York, the number 60 Warrior Racing Ford of Justin Belmonte. Again, 3rd win of the season for the number 60. Which, yeah, I believe my math is right, would make this win number 8 all time for him. This being his 4th season within the E-Motorsports network. And we caught the tail end of the burnouts there. And so, now that we've navigated our way successfully through this evening, let's go through our unofficial results. So, as mentioned, Justin Belmonte with the win. Ultimately, it comes out to an almost 3-second win over Jordan Kalinian in 2nd. Ryan Gibson rounds out the podium positions in 3rd. Again, a huge night for him as it relates to his playoff aspirations. Ty Higginbotham finishes 4th, getting by CD Mangrum late, who rounds out the top 5. Pole sitter Mason Tomlinson comes home in 6th. Jose Mercado started on the outside of the front row on this one, settles for 7th tonight. John Williams comes home in 8th to further cement his playoff chances. Bryce Fontaine in 9th after leading a decent chunk of the middle section of the race. And Mike Marini rounds out your top 10. And that, I believe, will be the... Oh, no, that's not the button I wanted. I wanted to see the second half of the leaderboard. There we go. Lee Campbell, the last car on the lead lap in 11th. Scott Bailey and Jared Ireland 1 lap down apiece in 12th and 13th. Andy Hurdle and Tom Janikowski 2 laps down apiece in 14th and 15th. Then Ryan O'Toole finishes 7 laps down in 16th. And nights to forget for Mario Ercolani. And then we get into our retirements in the form of Kyle Knoll, Blake Thronberg, and Jeremy Crow. So that is your unofficial results for tonight's, as I'll just put in the title to make it official here on the board, maybe. Let's see, the things you forget to do after a week off. All right, there it is. Voodoo Throwback 300 unofficial results. There you go. So, with that in mind, again, that is our run through the results. We'll chat with our top 3 here in a moment as coverage of the Voodoo Throwback 300 continues on the E-Motorsports Network NASCAR series presented by our friends at Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Matter of fact, let's hear from them as we go ahead and prep our top 3.
Good morning, Philip. Time for an oil change. Remember last time?
I'd rather not.
Took 3 hours. You forgot Little Henry's video game. You're not as entertaining as a video game, Philip.
Silence your oil change anxiety at Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Get an expert oil change in about 15 minutes with no appointment needed.
Thanks for coming in.
Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Service you can see, experts you can trust.
All right, folks, we are just about ready to pop into our interview room here with our top 3. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the proper channel here first. And again, not sure who's going to bring everybody over or how this is going to go, but I'll make sure we take care of this. So what we'll do is, we'll bring them in one by one as we often do. The first one usually more or less serves as a test for how the recording goes at the same time. So what we'll do now is, again, we'll introduce first. We're bringing him in first. Tonight's race winner, the number 60 Warrior Racing Ford out of East Patchogue, New York. 3rd time he's been to victory lane this season. It's the number 60 of Justin Belmonte. Justin, do we have a copy?
Yes, sir. How are you?
Doing great, and I see levels, so that's even better. And now we'll go ahead and bring in our runner-up. And finishing second in tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300 out of Salisbury, North Carolina, driving for Control Alt Defeat Motorsports. It is the 00 of Jordan Kalinian. Jordan, do we have a copy?
Got you, Jordy.
Yes, sir. And rounding out our top 3, I see popped into the chat there, and it's always great to chat to our 3rd place finisher. And it's a huge night for him as well, which we'll get into in a moment. It's number 23 Blue Collar Racing Chevy of Ryan Gibson out of Morgantown, West Virginia. Gibby, how are ya?
Doing well. Got a copy.
All right, gentlemen, we are through the grind that is the traditional 300 within our NASCAR series here at Charlotte, and I'll go to our race winner here first. Justin, it looked like certainly in the back half of the race, it really seemed like the setup came together for you, and once you got into positions where you were able to kind of make your way through the field, it seemed like you were going to be the car to beat in that second half. So what was it about how things kind of shaped up for you that really worked out for you again in the second half, especially in that last stint?
Yeah, the long green flag runs were pretty good. I was really good at saving tires, so I'm glad it went green. Yeah, I think that last pit stop, just getting out in front and not having to pass the other guys, was huge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we saw what the end result was with the clean air there. You more or less just kind of took off at the very end. And yeah, we'll go to Jordan here next. Obviously, in the first couple rounds of pit stops, we saw that you were more or less the driver that sort of triggered the pit stop windows with the undercut attempts that, more or less worked out for you. But yeah, over the course of the evening, like, was that kind of the strategy overall that you were going for there, just to make sure you stayed in contention, or what was the thought process there?
No, so I was actually pitting. Those were my scheduled stops. I pit every time with about one lap of fuel left, just to make sure that if I missed it, I had another chance to come around and hit pit. But I was downshifting a lot and leaving it in fourth just to try and get the car to turn. Car was tight, and I'm not great with a tight car, so I was just burning some extra fuel over some of the other guys, and had to pit a little bit earlier for that. And I think that kind of really cost me a chance at the win at the end.
Yeah, and we'll get into maybe some of the dynamics of the kind of final runs here in a minute. But obviously, for you, Gibby, this had probably the biggest implications in terms of results for anybody in the field, given the stage wins and positive stage points prior to the third place finish, to really claw your way back into the playoff picture with just the one regular season race left after tonight. So, yeah, how important was it for you to be able to come out and execute here, knowing that was kind of the situation?
Yeah, I was pretty much just thinking about that all day, knowing that I needed to capitalize on stage points. I was not expecting a stage win on top of that, but I will take it. And then having a third place finish on top of that, that's going to be a good points night.
Yeah, we'll see what the official numbers come out at on Sim Racer Hub relatively shortly here. And now, Jordan, you kind of alluded to it there before in terms of fuel runs and stuff like that. One of the things between myself and Race Control that we were sort of noticing was different, strategies in relation to sort of conservation to make sure everybody more or less got to the end there. So I guess I'll throw this across the board. A, was there any concern on your part for any of you? And B, if there was, what kinds of things were you trying to deploy to make sure that it didn't become an issue when, you know, crunch time eventually arrived? And again, that's an across the board question. So any of you can feel free to jump in.
I'm glad that last caution fell the way it did. It kind of took the math out of it, because I was kind of just winging it. I wasn't really sure on the math, so I was just running it to the end.
Right on, right on. Jordan, Ryan?
Yeah, I know for me that last caution really kind of messed up my strategy. I would have been a lot better on fuel if we ran that out. But after that last run, I was about one lap to the short there, so I was just leaving it in fifth and kind of coasting a little bit further into the corners. If I did drop to fourth, just short shifting back on the back straight. That way, I'm not burning as much fuel in the lower gear.
All right, Gibby, anything to add to that?
Uh, my issue was getting tight at the beginning. Um, so I kind of left it in fifth gear, like he was talking about, and it really helped the car in the longer run. I felt like I was able to get off center, off the corner, way better than in the later run on some people that were using fourth gear off the corners.
Yeah, fair enough. We saw, again, a few drivers deploying a few different things there. So certainly that all checks out. And yeah, the other thing I kind of wanted to get a collective opinion on, obviously, I wasn't there for Coda last week, so I didn't have as clear of a reference. But the last couple of races I was around, you guys, they had their fair share of intensity at Martinsville and Darlington. So by comparison, again, obviously, this being a longer race has its different set of challenges, but it looked quote unquote calmer out there. So, what was your sort of overall perspective there of the race itself as it progressed? And again, that's floor's open to anybody on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just the nature of a longer race, everyone's just kind of minding their business a little bit and just trying to make it to the end. So everyone kept it a little bit calmer. At the end there, I think if we got a later caution, you would have seen a lot more aggressive racing and tighter racing and maybe even some cautions. But just everyone did a really good job just keeping it clean and making it an enjoyable race.
All right,
Yeah, I agree
Justin,
with
Gibby.
Jordan. I agree with Jordan. Everybody was kind of chilled. Everybody knew it was a super long race. Nobody was really being quite as aggressive as normal. So it was everybody I think had the same strategy, just trying to make it.
Just to reiterate, the other two, essentially everybody got spread out and kind of had their own race going on. And then when you did get around people, it was hard to pass. So the racing was good at times.
Yeah, definitely some battles throughout the field over the course of the evening, but like I said, nothing really too insane or outlandish. So, solid run overall, and we'll see if that continues into the final race of the regular season, which will go down next week. The GTR Chicagoland 200. It's our first trip back to Chicagoland since I believe season one. So, not really a huge frame of reference for the entire field in terms of how this one's going to go, but I guess we'll go, 1, 2, 3 here in terms of overall sort of early thoughts or expectations on how this one's going to go. So, Justin, go ahead and kick us off.
I think Chicagoland's going to be good. I think it's an old track. The tires are going to be important. You're going to have to save them. I think I think we could do pretty well there. Hopefully.
All right, Jordan.
Yeah, I think it'd be a interesting one for sure. I don't recall the top really working on iRacing like it is in real life, but yeah, so going to be a lot on the bottom and just again, like Justin said, tires wearing out and going from there, seeing how it goes.
All righty, Gibby.
Yeah, I think it'll be a pretty good race. It'll be a good race in the points positions, people fighting for it. Like you said, we haven't been to Chicago for a while, so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think within the context of our series here, I think you're the only one of the three that's actually raced there within our little league. But again, that was back in the Heat days, so a lot's changed since then. So yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see how that all shakes out next Monday night. Stream will go live about 7:45 p.m. Eastern time on the E-Motorsports Network YouTube channel. But as always, before we sign off here for the night, again, just final word to any of you three. Just again, your general shout outs for sponsors, family, anyone you would like to acknowledge. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you guys for putting it on for us every week. Thanks, Warrior Wraps and GTR Motorsports. And yeah, it's good racing by everybody. It was a fun one tonight.
Alrighty, Jordan.
Yep, just appreciate the league and everybody for putting this on. It's been a fun season and looking forward to the next race.
Alrighty, and Gibby, go ahead and wrap us up.
Shout out to my teammates, Jared and Scott, and a special shout out to Michael Langley for helping me out tonight spotting. And thank you all for putting this together every year.
Alrighty, great to chat with all three of you. Again, congratulations on the finishes. And yeah, we will see you next week at Chicagoland to wrap up the regular season. Have a good night, boys.
Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Tori.
Thank
You
you.
too.
All right, folks, and that was the top three post-race chat featuring, again, race winner Justin Belmonte, eighth time in his E-Motorsports Network NASCAR Series career that he picks up the checkered flag. Jordan Kalinian finishing second in his 00 GTR motor, or not GTR, Control Alt Defeat. Where did I get GTR on that one? Control Alt Defeat Motorsports Toyota. Belmonte, of course, racing for Warrior Racing in his case. And third place, Ryan Gibson in his blue collar racing Chevy out of Morgantown, West Virginia. And like I said, that is pretty much going to wrap up our coverage of tonight's Voodoo Throwback 300 from the virtual Charlotte Motor Speedway. But again, that leaves us with just the one regular season race remaining. That is, of course, the GTR Motorsports Chicagoland 200 from the Chicagoland Speedway. And like I said earlier, the stream on that will begin next month, or the week from tonight, Monday, August 17th, 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time on the E-Motorsports Network YouTube channel. But for now, we're going to go ahead and sign off. So for everybody involved, drivers, competition committee, and everyone who helps make this a success, sponsors obviously as well. My name's Jordy Carraher. We hope you've enjoyed tonight's coverage of the Voodoo Throwback 300, and we'll see you in a week's time where we will finalize our 16 drivers who are going to battle it out for the Earl Ross Cup.
Good morning, Philip. Time for an oil change. Remember last time?
I'd rather not.
Took 3 hours. You forgot Little Henry's video game. You're not as entertaining as a video game, Philip.
Silence your oil change anxiety at Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Get an expert oil change in about 15 minutes with no appointment needed.
Thanks for coming in.
Valvoline Instant Oil Change. Service you can see, experts you can trust.